Good afternoon, everyone. How's it going? Got some more Seahawks stuff to talk about here, and obviously, a lot of focus is right now on the defensive coordinator position, but I want to go to the other side for a couple minutes here because lost in the whole interest generated by the fact that we moved off of Ken Norton Jr. is also the fact that we did not move off of Shane Waldron, the offensive coordinator. And I don't know why you would get rid of one guy and keep the other guy for a few more days or a week or a month and then get rid of him, right? Like, if you're going to purge your coaching staff, you'd probably want to do it all at about the same time, right? And besides, if you're going to fire your offensive coordinator, you want to do it within the first week of the offseason so you can quickly get in on interviews with other guys. A bunch of teams got eliminated from the playoffs this last weekend, so you want to get involved in those interviews, and you can't do that if you've already got somebody filling the position. So, my sense is that Shane Waldron will be coming back for 2022. I know some people don't like that. I know some people do not like him. I know some people were not impressed with that first season. I personally think this is fine. I don't have an issue with it. I don't think it's a good idea to hire a coordinator for 1 year and then fire him after 1 year. I think that's unless something really, really, really goes wrong in an obvious way on his end, and I don't believe that happened. It is in some areas his offense was very poor, but the end result was they were passable, and a lot of the areas that they were weak in were kind of understandable given the circumstances. So first, let me just say that I think sticking with Waldron for another year, especially if you're sticking with Wilson, makes sense. Jerking your quarterback around through different offensive systems it's not good. You don't want to do that unless you feel like you have to. And sometimes you do have to, but I think this is a circumstance where it makes some sense. To me, at the end of the day, the 2021 Seattle Seahawks, they didn't have a good offense, but by the end of the season, it was 16th in points scored. Granted, a lot of that was because of what they did at the end of the season after they were already pretty much eliminated. But 16th in points, 20th in yards in your first year play calling is not bad. And I'm sorry, but if anybody on this team deserves to have some excuses made for them, I kind of feel like it's Shane Waldron. The stuff he had to work with in 2021, I think it would have derailed a lot of offensive coordinators. So, I don't know. I kind of feel like we need to back off a little bit. He had to deal with his backup quarterback for 3.5 games. He had to deal with a quarterback playing with a busted finger that clearly, clearly bothered him, despite the fact that he was playing through it. For basically the entire second half of the season, at least those first 3 games back. He had to deal with a running back room that got decimated. Carson barely played. Penny didn't really do anything good until after the team was basically eliminated from the playoffs. Alex Collins played one really good game, and then he got hurt and was never the same. And the offensive line, while I don't think it was atrocious like some of you guys think, it's not very good. And more than that, I don't think this is the kind of offensive line that Waldron even really wants. So he had to overcome a lot. Like that Packers game, that Green Bay Packers game we played, Wilson's finger in that game was such that we didn't feel comfortable having him take snaps from under center, nor did we feel comfortable with him handing the ball off. So you can rip up a good chunk of your playbook knowing that, right? Like, it's hard. So I don't know. I kind of feel like we need to take it a little easy on Waldron. By the way, he's got Pete Carroll over his shoulder. By the way, by Carroll's own admission, we were still using a lot of the Schottenheimer playbook. I don't know. There's a lot going on in this offense. And by the way, they had problems, but they were putting up points until Geno Smith got involved more or less. If you look at those first 4 games, they were scoring. Just Geno got involved, and then Russ tried to play with a bad finger. Those were the games where things really kind of went sour for the offense. But it's not just about all of those. It's not just about the excuses you can make for Shane Waldron. It's also about where it could go in year number 2, because some of these things that we had in 2021, like it looks like the quarterback, some of the offensive linemen, most of the receivers, possibly the tight end, a lot of these things are going to come back, and they're going to have more comfort in this system because they've had a year in it. And I think that is very valuable, and I think some people tend to overlook things like that. Like, you're going to see less of the Schottenheimer playbook this year because we're not going to need it as much because we've had more time with the Waldron playbook. So that should help in and of itself. I mean, just being in a system for a second year, there's automatically going to be some improvement, right? And what I'm about to say does not guarantee anything. By no means can we say this guy did this, so therefore Shane Waldron's going to do the same thing. But I do want to point out the happy path, the good scenario that this can go on. Now, I'm going to point to 2 recent examples, and I've been over this stuff before. If you guys have been watching my videos for a while, you know, but I feel like I just want to remind people how this can go in 2022 if Waldron is good and if you give him the opportunity to have a second year. So 2 really good examples from recent time that I want to draw focus to are the Falcons and the Packers. 2015 Atlanta Falcons. They hire Kyle Shanahan to be their offensive coordinator. He had been an offensive coordinator before. He had a little bit more experience than Shane Waldron doing this kind of stuff. But nevertheless, they bring in Kyle Shanahan to be their coordinator, and this first year it doesn't go that well. They go 8-8, and their offense is 21st in points, 7th in yards. It was a pretty mediocre offense, pretty forgettable. Certainly nothing that would make you think, hey, this offensive coordinator is about to become one of the hottest prospects in the NFL this offseason, or in the next offseason, right? It was very okay. And then in 2016, second year in Kyle Shanahan's system, Falcons have the number 1 offense in the league, 34 points a game, 11-5. They make the Super Bowl. They almost win the Super Bowl. Should have really won the Super Bowl. So, first in points, second in yards. They have the league MVP at quarterback. And most of what changed really was just the fact that they had an extra year in that system. If you take a look at the 2015 Atlanta Falcons offense, you got Matt Ryan at quarterback, Devontae Freeman's the lead running back, Julio Jones lead receiver, Jake Matthews, Andy Levitre, Chris Chester, and Ryan Schroer on the offensive line. The only real changes the Falcons made from 2015 to 2016 in terms of personnel were Mohamed Sanu at wide receiver and Alex Mack at center. And Alex Mack was a significant upgrade at center, but everything else, Devontae Freeman, Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, their lead tight end receiver was, I think, still Jacob Tamme. They had a Levine Toilolo as their de facto starting tight end. Both years, Jacob Tamme led their team in receptions for a tight end, though. So, again, you go back and forth between these 2 rosters. It's very, very similar. Just 2 real changes to that starting crew. And that's what I like to point to. Now, Kyle Shanahan is special. To say that Shane Waldron's going to be just like Kyle Shanahan, who is legitimately one of the better offensive minds in recent NFL history, that's not fair. But it does show you that an extra year in a new offensive system, especially when it's so different from the previous offensive system, does do wonders. So keep this in mind. The next example I'm going to bring up would be somebody who is actually an assistant coach under Shanahan in Atlanta, Matt LaFleur. So Matt LaFleur spends a bunch of time under Kyle Shanahan, and he eventually gets his chance to be the head coach in Green Bay in 2019. Now, Matt LaFleur, I think he went to the Titans after he hooked up with Shanahan and then built some credibility up in Tennessee, and then he became a Packer, if I recall that timeline correctly. But, look, Matt LaFleur was obviously the head coach in Green Bay, so it's a little different, but we all know it's Matt LaFleur's offense. And Matt LaFleur inherited some really good players with the 2019 Packers, but the results were not very good. Now, the record was 13-3, but their offense was 15th in points, 18th in yards, average. It was an average offense. Overall, just middle of the pack. They won a lot of close games. The refs handed them a couple games, and they were just decent offense. And in 2020, second year under Matt LaFleur, same record, but now the offense is carrying. First in the league in points, fifth in yards. One of the best offenses in the league, maybe the best offense in the league. And Aaron Rodgers went from being just a good quarterback to a legitimate MVP. And everything had just gotten much better. And what changed in terms of personnel from the 2019 to the 2020 Packers? Not a ton. They still had Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Jones, Devontae Adams, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Mercedes Lewis, David Bakhtiari, Elgin Jenkins, Billy Turner. Really, the changes that the Packers made from 2019 to 2020 were restricted to mostly, they got rid of Jimmy Graham and replaced him with Robert Tonyan. Okay, so there was a change at tight end, one of their tight ends. And they kicked Billy Turner out from right guard to right tackle, and they brought in Lucas Patrick. But other than that, basically everything's the same. They lost Brian Bulaga to, I think, the Chargers, and they replaced him with Turner, kicking him out to tackle, and then brought in a new right guard. That's it. It's the same quarterback, same running back, same receivers, same left side of the offensive line. It's really, the difference was really all about just an extra year of familiarity within that system. Aaron Rodgers went from a guy who was probably barely top 10 to somebody who might have been top 1, probably was top 1. Well, at the very least, he's top 2. So these are the things that can happen if you give some time. Sometimes you got to be patient. A lot of people aren't. I know last year was frustrating. I wasn't in love with everything Waldron was doing either. Don't get it twisted. I was not enamored with everything that happened. But this is the stuff that can happen if you're willing to give things time. And the only way to find out if he's capable of doing it is to give him that time and see what happens. So I'll see you guys later today. Hawks Nest stream coming up soon. Peace out. Go Hawks. Let me know what you think.